But what we're experiencing right now is the explosion of the concept of Big Bang Theory, the explosion of this universe that we see, and then it's re-imploding. And now, how many players are there?
This episode is made possible by OIT VoIP. Find your best-in-class revenue generation for MSPs all over the world. Learn more via the link in the show notes.
Morning, and welcome to the September 12th episode of MSP Dispatch, your source for news, community events, and commentary in the MSP channel. My name's Tony Francisco, and I am just a small co-host to my brother, Ray Orsini. First off, let me just start it off with, we're back, baby!
We're back! We're back! But you know what we really need to do, Tony? I haven't heard this in over a month. Let's get into something. Let's hear it.
Let's get into the news. Coming straight from BBC.com, from Lily Jamali, Google's lucrative ad tech business goes on trial. The U.S. government is challenging Google's ad tech business, claiming Alphabet, Google's parent company, operates as a monopoly. The trial will examine whether Alphabet's $200 billion ad revenue comes from stifling competitions. Alphabet argues its success is due to effective services and points to growing competition from companies like Amazon and Apple. This case follows a recent ruling against Google's search monopoly, where Judge Leonie Brinkema will hear both sides, and with potential remedies like focusing on business model changes. Additionally, the UK's Competition and Markets Authority has flagged Google's ad practices as potentially anti-competitive. Ray, this is where we get into an interesting scenario. Hey, you are entirely too successful, so let's start figuring out where your success is generating money and then break that up. Or the other side is, hey, you're crushing all the little guys. And as a little guy, it'd be really cool if maybe we had some equal play or not a pay-to-play mentality based on the mechanism that you've built. What are your thoughts on this? Let's unpack it.
We're both entrepreneurs. We're both have been doing this a long time. The goal is to grow the company. The goal is to make more money. This kills me because I get there's rules for monopolies, but at the same time, they weren't designed for a global market.
You and I are thinking the same thing. So when you start looking at, do you remember Warp OS? For those of you who don't remember what this was, there were three players in the market. And you have Apple, which was a prominent player coming up, Microsoft, which was, and then you had Warp OS. Now, Warp OS was the reasoning for the non-monopoly play. Was anybody using Warp OS? Not a single person was using that. But what we're experiencing right now is the explosion of the concept of Big Bang Theory, the explosion of this universe that we see, and then it's re-imploding. And now, how many players are there? Okay, where did MCI go?
But that's like you were saying, going back to OS Warp. What was the rival architecture back then? Mac? Apple? Like, you get what I'm saying? So if it was okay back then, none of this makes any sense to me. If you're an MSP, if this makes sense to you, please explain it to me on MM and Discord.
Well, but it opens up, I think the final conclusion is that it really opens up problems, because now you have one lens, or in this case, two lenses through Microsoft and Apple, two lenses that we look through. What about the other lenses? And, having an open source architecture right now is so well received because now it's multiple people looking through a completely different lens or a multitude of lenses. And the more eyes on something, the better. I think we can agree with that. In fact, I do believe your next story literally covers some bugs that kind of slip through, but small bugs, right? Little bugs that wouldn't have affected anyone unless you fly or have seen a plane over you or been to an airport.
Yep, small bug, or maybe not. In my next story, analysts say a bug let them add fake pilots to rosters used for TSA checks, in a story written by Wes Davis for The Verge. Analysts Ian Carroll and Sam Curry discovered a vulnerability in the login system used by the TSA to verify airline crew members at airport security checkpoints. The flaw was found on a third-party website called FlyCASS, which provides smaller airlines access to TSA systems. Using basic SQL injection, they were able to add themselves to airline rosters, potentially granting unauthorized access to secure areas. The researchers confirmed this by logging in as administrator, and although the TSA denies relying solely on the database for authentication, the vulnerability still presented a significant security risk. Tony, this seems bad.
It was literally just a tick in the SQL injection that allowed them to add a user to a list, which means if you've ever been to an airport and you walk up and you've got clear or you have TSA and one of the flight attendants or captains, they walk right past you and then they flash something, they check their name, boom, they go right through. That is the list that allows that person. Because we know that this was done, how many users have been added to this list over the last, we'll just say 10 years, that now at will can go on to in through an airport like it's nothing?
Taking it back to the MSP world, I'm a big fan, and I scream this a lot: vendor due diligence. And don't stop at the vendor, look at their sub-processors. Because in this case, the weakness wasn't the TSA system. It was the system tying into the TSA system. Those sub-processors are just as dangerous. When you're setting up APIs connectivity, you need to limit the scope of those tokens or whatever authentication you're doing. That's the whole part of AAA, right? It's not just enough to say you have access. You have to limit the access. You have to monitor the access, and hopefully some kind of intelligent engine making sure that normal behavior is occurring on a regular basis, right? So I'll leave it with this. MSPs, how would you have prevented this? I'm curious. Or how many are looking at this and saying, oh, shit, I need to start looking at sub-processors.
If you like this content, please click like and subscribe.